Part 102. Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me, the boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1011. Wen Qiao stood aside, looking at the person on the hospital bed, and whispered, "Uncle, why are you leaving me here? I actually can't help you with anything." She had only studied acupuncture for a few months, and now she was practicing Western medicine. She was not familiar with Western medicine, so she really couldn't help. "I didn't ask you to help, I asked you to learn." Wen Qiao, huh? Studying. After all, he had no plans to get married. He needed to find at least one successor for his medical skills, and Akiao was the most suitable person. She was smart, capable, and quite interested in this field. If you don't pass it on to her, who else can you pass it on to? Susi read all the case information about Gu Xiao for a long time, and then personally performed a full-body examination on him, focusing mainly on blood, heart, and brain examinations. He explained to Wen Qiao very carefully, and Wen Qiao listened with rapt attention. Late at night, Hizue sent someone to take them to their own rooms to rest. The two of them were not allowed to leave before Gu Xiao was operated on. The next morning, at the dinner table, Susi said directly, "Starting at noon today, I will prepare for Gu Xiao's surgery. I need 2 assistant doctors from the cardiology department and 4 nurses. Hizue, I have prepared it for you early in the morning. You can start at any time." Susi slowly cut the bacon into small pieces, put it in his mouth, chewed it gently. "Yeah. How sure are you that the operation will be successful?" Susi raised his eyes and looked at him. 50%. Hizue's face froze, and the veins in his hands holding the knife and fork were exposed. 50%. "Susi, is there any problem?" "Why only 50%? Aren't you an authority in the industry?" "Susi, so how confident do the doctors on your medical team give you?" Hizue choked, and the most powerful doctor under his name only dared to give a 30% chance of winning. Susi threw away the knife and fork in his hand. "So do you want to take this risk?" Hizue's eyes were like an eagle, staring at Susi and saying nothing for a long time. Susi took a sip of coffee and said, "Whatever you want." Hizue almost said a few words from between his teeth, "It can be done." "Susi, then you should know what preparations are needed for surgery. You should be ready before noon." "No." Finally at noon, after Susi and Wen Qiao had eaten, they entered the preparation room, put on surgical clothes and gloves, and then entered the operating room. All the medical staff Susi needs are in place. Wen Qiao took a closer look and saw excitement shining in those people's eyes, which made her a little puzzled. What she didn't know was how authoritative her brother-in-law was in the medical field. When these doctors and nurses heard that they could perform surgeries on the same stage as Professor Su, they were all excited. This was a rare learning opportunity. After all, Professor Su used to only use his own medical team for surgeries. Susi whispered, "Akiao, you are right next to me watching this operation. I don't need to do anything." Wen Qiao stood at the core position throughout the whole process, on Professor Su's left-hand side. Susi would patiently explain every step to her. The complexity of this operation, as well as Gu Xiao's blood type and the degree of heart atrophy and damage, were unprecedented. 4 hours into the operation, suddenly, a massive hemorrhage occurred in the heart valve. Several assistant doctors and nurses suddenly panicked. "Because lying on the operating table is my husband's younger brother, who is someone he cares about very much. If I can't save the young master, I'm afraid my husband will bury them with him. It's May, please vote. I heard that the little fairy who votes for Shushu will have good luck in May. There will be more updates during the day. Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me, the boss lost his memory and only remembers me." Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1012. Wen Qiao glanced at his uncle and saw beads of sweat on his forehead. He immediately raised his hand to wipe his sweat with gauze, without asking anything, fearing that it would disrupt his rhythm. She just watched quietly, hoping for a miracle in her heart. Hizue had been waiting outside the operating room for 4 hours when he suddenly received news that it was a heart valve hemorrhage. He also studied medicine, so he naturally knew what a heart valve hemorrhage meant. This means that the operation is likely to fail. Hizue stared at the door with sinister eyes, wishing he could break in immediately, grab Susie by his collar and question him, "Is this your level? Do you have the nerve to call yourself an authority in the medical field?" Teresa looked at her husband with fear, fearing that he would rush into the operating room if he disagreed, which would affect Mr. Su's operation. Even if the heart valve bleeds, there should still be hope, that we can turn the tide. When it comes to medicine, she trusts Mr. Su. In the operating room, Wen Qiao watched helplessly as the curve on the electrocardiogram calmed down. Everyone was already panicking. Susie said calmly, "Get on ECMO." The core parts of ECMO are membrane lungs, artificial lungs, and blood pumps, artificial hearts, which can provide long-term cardiopulmonary support to patients with severe cardiopulmonary failure and win valuable time for critical illness rescue. Generally speaking, ECMO indicates that the patient is in critical condition. If ECMO cannot work, the patient will most likely not be saved. The assistant doctor quickly connected the ECMO equipment, and Susie's eyes were serious. Wen Qiao could feel that the atmosphere in the operating room was solemn. Gu Xiao's life was at this moment of life and death. She hoped that Gu Xiao could survive. When a person dies, there is nothing. After connecting to the ECMO, he put on the defibrillator. Susie personally held the handle of the defibrillator and exerted force on Gu Xiao's heart. Susie's whole body was bounced up by the defibrillator and fell back to the operating table. The EKG is still a flat straight line. Wen Qiao's heart was in his throat. "Gu Xiao, cheer up and wake up quickly. Stop joking." The defibrillator clicked again and again, and finally, even Susie felt that there was probably no hope. He adjusted the energy dose to the maximum and looked at the ECG and blood pressure monitor aside. Then he slowly placed the defibrillator on his atrium and pressed the switch. Finally, if there is still no hope, then Gu Xiao will never be saved. The atmosphere in the operating room was so tense that the assistant doctor and several nurses did not even dare to breathe. Wen Qiao kept his eyes on the ECG and blood pressure monitor, hoping that the curve on it would return again. With a boom, the defibrillator vibrated again. Gu Xiao's face turned pale, and the line on the electrocardiograph was still a gentle straight line. Wen Qiao's heart gradually sank. Gu Xiao just disappeared. Is this surgery necessary? If he didn't undergo surgery, he would at least still be alive in a vegetative state. There was silence in the operating room for 5 seconds. There was a camera inside, and Hizue could clearly see the electrocardiograph outside. Teresa looked at Hizue in fear. Mister. Hizue's whole body was shrouded in cold air, and his eyes were extremely gloomy. Why is he so kind to Gu Xiao? Because in a sense, he and Gu Xiao are the same kind of person, but his character is much stronger than Gu Xiao. He was also an illegitimate child, and was taken to country M by his mother. His mother hooked up with foreigners abroad, drank and took drugs, and became involved in many bad habits. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me, the boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1013. When he was 10 years old, he ran away from home because he was fed up with his mother's tendency to bring foreigners to the house. After that, he was taken away by the Pentagram Research Organization. Like Susie, he was a person with a very high IQ. Pentagram liked children with high IQs and helped them with various researches. Then, he met Gu Xiao. He had always been alone. Like Susi, he had almost no empathy. But when he saw Gu Xiao being slapped by his mother in public, he actually felt that he was in the same boat. After getting to know each other, I found that Gu Xiao and he were indeed the same kind of people. In this world, he has no worries and almost no emotions that humans should have, but for this younger brother who was born in a similar situation to him, he is sincere. Probably because he felt that even if he died in the future, there would still be someone who looked like him in the world, which would be a kind of continuation. But he actually left earlier than him. From now on, he is alone again. He looked down upon Susi and felt that Susi had returned to his family and was coveting the warmth of his family like ordinary people who did nothing. Such Susi was not worthy of being called his opponent. But he said he didn't like it, but what about his heart? Only he himself knows that he occasionally feels a little envious. But now, Gu Xiao, his only relative, is also gone. Just as he was about to kick in the door, Teresa grabbed his arm. "Sir." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the straight line suddenly undulating on the TV screen outside the operating room. Teresa exclaimed, "Sir, look." Hizaway also saw it. Everyone in the operating room also saw it. Susi immediately put down the defibrillator in his hand and said methodically, "Continue the operation." Everyone was almost dumbfounded. Only Wen Qiao reacted the fastest and immediately handed over the scalpel that his uncle needed. And that line became more and more stable and returned to the average value. There is water vapor in the oxygen mask, and the blood pressure rises to normal levels. Wen Qiao breathed a sigh of relief, picked up the gauze, and wiped the sweat from his uncle's forehead. The surgery continues. The operation lasted from 12 o'clock at noon to 12 o'clock at night, a full 12 hours. Wen Qiao's heels were numb as she stood, but she was just a casual bystander. Thinking about how my uncle had to be highly concentrated for 12 hours to perform a very difficult operation without eating or drinking water, the intensity was really torturous. He put the scalpel into the hands of the nurse on the side, and left the rest of the suture work to the assistant doctors. Wen Qiao stretched out his hand to help him and said softly, "Was the operation successful?" "It will take 3 days of observation. Only when Gu Xiao wakes up after 3 days can I make a conclusion." Wen Qiao's heart skipped a beat, thinking that he could sit back and relax after the operation was completed, but he didn't expect that he would still need to be observed for 3 days. Half an hour later, the door to the operating room was slowly opened, and Wen Qiao and Susi walked out together. What greeted them was Hizaway's face that could not be considered happy. Susi sneered and said, "I spent 12 hours doing surgery on you, and this is the only face you have." Hizaway bit his jaw muscle slightly. "I am operating on Gu Xiao, and it is also to save your niece. Moreover, Gu Xiao is not out of danger yet. What do you expect me to do to you?" Wen Qiao was a little angry. "My uncle has been working for 12 hours. Please let us eat first." Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me. The boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1014. Teresa said quickly, "The meal has been prepared for a long time. Please come with me." Wen Qiao and Susi went to the dining room to eat, while Gu Xiao was transferred to the sterile intensive care unit. Hizaway stood outside and took a look through the huge transparent glass. The person on the bed was still lifeless. Wearing an oxygen mask on his face and various tubes inserted into his body. 2 doctors were replaced inside to monitor various data at any time. Teresa said from the side, "Sir, there should be no big problem. You should be able to trust Professor Su's medical skills." Hizaway breathed a sigh of relief. At least he didn't die on the operating table. But the next 3 days are equally critical. It is very likely that there will be various complications of infection. Once such symptoms appear, it will be too late to receive treatment, so you cannot leave people for 24 hours. After Su Si and Wen Qiao finished eating, they went back to their rooms. After washing up, Wen Qiao went to bed. He Ziwei was sitting in the side hall smoking, listening to Teresa's report. Mr. Su and Miss Wen have gone back to their rooms to sleep. He Ziwei took 2 puffs of cigarette irritably. Can they sleep? Teresa didn't dare to speak. With Mr. Su's temper, why couldn't she sleep? Sir, isn't this asking too much? Su Si was even more heartless than Wen Qiao, and he did fall asleep quickly. Wen Qiao was still thinking about some things in his mind, worried about another accident in the past 3 days, worried about Gu Xiao's complications. I didn't sleep well at night, half asleep until 6 in the morning. Her uncle's room was next door. She pulled on her slippers and knocked on the door. There was no movement inside. Wen Qiao turned the door handle and the door opened, but it was not locked. Is her uncle so relieved about He Ziwei? Entering the room, the light in the room with the curtains drawn was dim. Her uncle was lying on the bed, sleeping soundly. Wen Qiao touched his chin. He really didn't have any emotions. Is it possible for such a person to get married in this life? She didn't know which girl was going to be put on the stall, so she held 2 seconds of silence for that girl in advance. The straight man from Century Steel had enough to drink from the stall. Wen Qiao sat on the sofa and waited until 7 o'clock before the person on the bed responded. He looked up and saw Wen Qiao, but he was not frightened. His posture was a little hoarse and he said, "Why are you in my room? I can't sleep since 6 o'clock. I'll wait for you for a while, have breakfast together, and then check on Gu Xiao's condition." Su Si pressed his temples. There's no need to stay up all night. You don't go to bed until 1 o'clock. Is 5 hours of sleep enough? Wen Qiao, that's enough. At the breakfast table, I sat down and slept for 5 hours, 6 hours, and 2 hours respectively. Yes, He Ziwei had only slept for 2 hours, and now his eyes were black and blue. The operation has been completed, it's time to tell the remaining clues. He Ziwei held the knife and fork in his hand. Gu Xiao is not awake yet. All I promised was surgery. If you want to go back on your words, He Ziwei, then give it a try. He Ziwei, so what can you do to me? Su Si said indifferently, if he develops complications and I don't help him, do you think your people can save him? He Ziwei closed his eyes. In this transaction, he was indeed in a passive position. Because his brother is on the verge of death, and his niece still has 2 years to live. He has no negotiating leverage at all. At present, I have the location of 7 people. I will give you the address of the first one. This person is in Haikan. Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me, the boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1015. Wen Qiao's eyes lit up. Would that person be willing to donate blood to me? How much do I need to donate? Your weight and total body blood are about 4,200 milliliter for 7 people, each person takes 600 milliliter. Su Si lowered his eyes slightly. What conditions will the other party have? He Ziwei raised his eyebrows. You need to ask these questions yourself. I will ask Teresa to write you the address of the first person. After Gu Xiao wakes up, you can go directly to him. Wen Qiao's heart only fluctuated slightly. Their blood was inherently rare. The other party was not related to her, so it was impossible for him to willingly draw 600 ml of blood. As for what kind of request he would make, she had no way of guessing at the moment. After breakfast, Wen Qiao's cell phone rang. It was Fu Nanli, and He Ziwei glanced at her coldly. Wen Qiao answered the phone. I have a flight today and will go to your place later. Are you at home? Wen Qiao, I am not at home. Where? When Xiao touched his neck, you can go directly to Helsinki. I have not been in Heiken for the past 2 days. Not in Heiken? Where? Wen Xiao felt that his skills were a little rusty after he had not lied for a long time. He couldn't answer the question for a long time, and finally found a long-lost feeling, isn't it summer vacation? Yu and I went to Hangzhou for a 2-day vacation. Return. Fu Nanli on the other end of the phone narrowed his eyes slightly, Hang Cheng. Wen Xiao, yes, in Hangzhou. Why didn't you tell me when you went to Hangzhou? Wen Xiao, I didn't have time to tell you. Fu Nanli, why do I feel that your words sound familiar? Wen Xiao, is there any? You lied to me before. When you didn't want to see me, you seemed to have said you were going on a trip with Lu Yu. Beads of sweat suddenly appeared on Wen Xiao's forehead. Su Ce answered the phone, Akiao and I are together. We have indeed come to Hangzhou. Fu Nanli's suspicion was dispelled. With her brother-in-law here, the girl wouldn't do anything bad. She gave some more warnings and then hung up the phone. Su Ce handed her the phone and rubbed her head, why are you so afraid of your boyfriend? Wen Xiao, I'm either afraid of him, or I think he won't agree if I tell him the truth. I'm afraid he would rather let his body be damaged than let me take any risks. Su Ce, will he? Is there such love in the world? He seemed incomprehensible. Wen Xiao did not hesitate, he will definitely do it. I will talk to him about it slowly. The two of them went outside the sterile ward and looked at the people inside through the huge glass. Uncle, what are your feelings for Gu Xiao? He knows that I will die if I leave Fu Nanli, and he also knows that Fu Nanli's blood can save me. Is this what you told him? Su Ce, back then, he's away and I hadn't even gotten to the point where we were at odds. He's away was kind to him and treated him as his own brother. Gu Xiao didn't talk much and was smart, so he spent some time learning from me. As for how he knew this, he's away should have said it, and he's away learned this information through unfair means. He has never followed the right path. Sometimes, I can't guard against him. So I left later. Wen Xiao understood that this was the case. Fortunately, Gu Xiao didn't hurt you. That was when the fight between Hizawei and I was at its most serious. If we lost, maybe I wouldn't be able to return to you and live such a life. 2 more chapters. Double monthly pass period, keep asking for monthly passes. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me, the boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1016. So what did you use to restrain him? I won't tell you about the internal matters. He was too sinister, and he himself was not very honorable. In some places, he was even similar to Hizawei, so he didn't want to tell Qiao. Wen Xiao didn't ask any further questions. 2 doctors in the ward came out to take over their shifts. When they saw Su Ce, they quickly came forward and bowed to him respectfully. How is Gu Xiao? All the young master's organs are normal, his heartbeat is normal, his blood pressure is normal, and his breathing is slowly returning to normal. Is there no rejection of the blood? No. At that time, he had a massive heart valve hemorrhage and received a large amount of blood transfusion. There was no rejection, which meant that there was no major problem. I understand. If you have any questions, call me immediately. Okay, Professor Su. Wen Xiao and Su Ce stayed in this impregnable mansion for another 2 days. She touched her bracelet. Fu Nanli was coming back today, but she probably wouldn't be able to leave here until tomorrow. At the lunch table, Wen Xiao asked, I see that Gu Xiao is recovering well. Can we go first? Hizawei cut the steak slowly, no. Wen Xiao clicked his tongue, I still have something very important to do. Nothing is as important as his safety. It was you who caused him to be like this. Don't you feel any guilt at all? Wen Qiao lowered his head and smiled. As for Gu Xiao, I sympathize with him, but if you really want to confuse right and wrong, I don't mind helping you sort it out. He Ziwei put down the knife and fork in his hand, and Teresa's heart tightened. Professor Su went to the ward to look after Gu Xiao, and now these two were at the dinner table. Both of them are not very good-tempered, and the bruises from the last beating haven't faded yet. But this is your husband's territory now, can't Miss Wen be a little more tolerant? If a fight breaks out, she will probably be injured as well, and since Mr. Su is caught in the middle, it won't be easy. You should tell me. He Ziwei's hypocritical smile instantly faded away, and Teresa was frightened by the coldness. Wen Qiao was not afraid of his cold face, neither Fu Nanli nor I have ever been sorry to Gu Xiao. Gu Xiao approached me with evil intentions and wanted to plot against his brother. After Fu Nanli found out, he didn't do anything to him. Even said that if he wanted to, he could recognize this younger brother, but he, who was sensitive and fragile, collapsed after being fooled by his mother's words and the reporter's few words, and came to treat him with a knife. Brother takes revenge. Teresa's heart was lifted and she said to herself, Miss Wen, please stop talking. Didn't you see the expression on Mr. Wen's face? The person who started the trouble was Gu Xiao. To be honest, he did not deserve sympathy for what he did to himself. You have no position to vent your anger on unrelated people, such as me or Fu Nanli, because of this matter. While talking, He Ziwei had already walked up to Wen Qiao. Teresa trembled and stepped forward. Sir, she is a girl and she talks without restraint. You should not be as familiar with her as she is. Teresa had all her good words, but Wen Qiao was good at adding fuel to the fire. He raised his face and looked at He Ziwei with a pair of clear eyes. Do you want to be beaten? Can He Ziwei endure it? Then it won't be called He Ziwei. The four bodyguards on the side suddenly felt excited. He Ziwei held Wen Qiao's chin. Do you know who you are provoking? Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me. The boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1017. Wen Qiao smiled slightly. You. He Ziwei's eyes were gloomy, but the touch under his fingertips was incredibly smooth. The next second, his handsome face was punched. Four bodyguards rushed up immediately. Wen Qiao broke free from his big hand on her chin and punched him in the chest again. Who told you to touch me? Only Fu Nanli could touch her face. He Ziwei is not a person with strong martial arts. Although he and Su Ce have some skills, they are not masters. One is focused on research and the other is focused on intrigues. They always have bodyguards when they come in and out. Who dares to disturb him? Naturally, I won't practice more frequently. This was the second time he had been beaten in so many years. The bodyguards immediately surrounded him. He Ziwei rubbed the corners of his mouth. The old wounds were not healed, but new ones were added. He was beaten twice in his life, and it turned out to be from the same person. He Ziwei raised his hand to signal the bodyguards to retreat. Will victory depend on numbers? Just for such a delicate little girl in front of me? This is not his style. So, Teresa watched her husband being beaten up by Wen Qiao, while four bodyguards stood by, helpless. He Ziwei, a despised predator in the business world of Country M, was inhumane and sinister. Now, he was beaten so hard by a beautiful girl that he couldn't fight back. He was lying on the ground. Wen Qiao twisted his wrist and half knelt beside him. The majestic Bigshot was so humiliated. Wen Qiao could see in He Ziwei's eyes that he was about to tear her apart, and he chuckled softly. So Mr. He now realizes that Gu Xiao's matter is actually related to me and Fu Nanli. Doesn't it matter? Just tell me you're wrong and I'll let you go. Taking advantage of the situation, He Ziwei suddenly turned over. clamped Wen Qiao's wrist with his backhand, pressed Wen Qiao back, and strangled her neck with a strong hand. Sure enough, He Ziwei is very good at finding opportunities, even in fights. He Ziwei looked at the person lying on the ground with a condescending attitude. His black hair was disheveled, his skin was snowy and his lips were red, and there was a thin blood stain on his forehead for some reason. A pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes were slightly upward when looking at people. He had never seen such a person before. He Ziwei, who had always loved women, felt a strange emotion deep in his heart. This Wen Qiao was different from the women he had met before, very different. At least no woman dared to beat him so fearlessly, and that was in the presence of 4 bodyguards. How dare you quibble? Wen Qiao didn't struggle. I'm not quibbling, I'm telling the truth. Believe it or not, if I try harder, you will die in my hands. Wen Qiao's expression was even a little lazy. Then you can give it a try and see if my brother-in-law will let you go, and see if Fu Nanli will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Not afraid, there was no fear in her eyes. He was a little curious. She had no chance of winning here. He crushed her to death like an ant. Her brother-in-law should have told her that he was not a good person. Why was she not afraid at all? By chance, Su Ce entered the living room and saw his Akiao being pinned to the ground by He Ziwei, unable to move. He immediately became angry. He Ziwei, what are you doing? He Ziwei released his grip on Wen Qiao, and Su Ce immediately stepped forward to help her up. He was desperately trying to save Gu Xiao's life, but He Ziwei actually bullied his Akiao where he couldn't see him. How dare you hurt her? Looking up, He Ziwei had obvious bruises on the corners of his mouth. He deserved to be beaten. Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me, the boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1018. You should ask your niece, who hurt whom. After saying that, he left the living room with an angry look. Su Ce helped Wen Qiao up and looked up and down. Are you injured anywhere? Wen Qiao moved his wrist bones. Fortunately, I wasn't seriously injured. It was him who deserved a beating. Su Ce, let's leave now. Wen Qiao held her uncle's hand. It's okay. Just finish the fight. Don't fall short. He Ziwei didn't take advantage. He was even more seriously injured. Su Ce glanced at her. His bodyguards are here, how dare you argue with him? Wen Qiao, I see that he is unhappy. He always confuses right and wrong. He always blames me and Fu Nanli for Gu Xiao's coma. Su Ce chuckled and shook his head. This girl didn't even know what kind of madness she had provoked. He Ziwei can be said to be a man who will retaliate against others. Okay, from now on, when you are in front of him, you can tolerate it as long as you can. After Gu Xiao wakes up, I hope there will be no contact with him. Wen Qiao, don't you still need him to give clues? No contact is required to provide clues, just phone calls. If it weren't for Akiao, he would never want to have any contact with this kind of person again in his life. Wen Qiao felt less optimistic. If Gu Xiao wakes up, will he return to the AF club? If so, I always feel that their involvement with He Ziwei will not be limited to this. The phone buzzed, it was Fu Nanli calling, and Wen Qiao suddenly felt that the phone had become a hot potato. Uncle, pick it up for me and tell me I'll go back tomorrow. Su Ce, you girl, I'm not good at lying. Don't blame me if you spill the beans. Wen Qiao, just say that you and I are playing. Su Ce answered the phone. The man's voice on the other end was doting. When he heard his voice, Su Ce could feel that the person on the other side felt like he had eaten a fly. Ah Qiao and Yu went out to play. Oh, I forgot to bring my phone, what's the matter? Wen Qiao gave her brother-in-law a thumbs up. Just say it casually, my uncle is worthy of being a brother-in-law. Fu Nanli had just gotten off the plane. He was still wearing the captain's uniform. He stretched out his hand and pulled his tie, and said in a cold voice, "Where did she go to play? It's not convenient to bring a mobile phone to the beach." "Wen Xiao, my uncle is so humble and very talented in lying. Don't she know I'm coming back today?" "Well, she will return to Haikan tomorrow. Aren't you with her? Let her take a call." Susie said calmly, "I'm not here, I don't like to bask in the sun. Let her call me back when she comes back." "Good." Wen Xiao finally breathed a sigh of relief. Fu Nanli over there always felt that there was something abnormal about this matter, but he didn't want to think too much about it. Susie returned the phone to Wen Xiao. "I want you to call him back later." Wen Xiao, "Yes, I understand." Although he agreed verbally, Wen Xiao forgot to call Fu Nanli back because he had been observing Gu Xiao's situation with his uncle. In the most critical few hours, if Gu Xiao is still awake, it will be another difficult battle. Wen Xiao raised his hand to check the time from time to time. There was not much time left. Susie changed into protective clothing and entered the ward with Wen Xiao. Susie pointed to the chair next to the hospital bed. "Sit down and talk to him." "Wen Xiao, what are you talking about? He's not awake yet." "It's just because he didn't wake up, so if you talk to him, do you know what he cares about?" Wen Xiao sat down and didn't know what to say first. After a while, he said, "You have to live well. If you die, your brother will be sad." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me, the boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1019. Fu Nanli has always hoped to have a younger brother or younger sister. If Gu Xiao died, or died because of him, he would definitely be sad. The person in the hospital bed showed no reaction. Wen Xiao said eloquently, "The current situation of the club is quite good. Xiaobai has always been burdened by your pressure before, but recently he seems to have thought about it. According to Brother Dong, he is expected to win the championship. If you wake up, we can come together go on stage to receive the award. Your name has always been on the list of the AF club. Wen Qi and the others are also waiting for you to come back. They always ask me what happened to Gu Xiao, where he went, and why he just left." Gu Xiao's fingers moved slightly. Wen Xiao added, "And your grandma always cries. Every time I pass by, I can't bear it. She always pulls me and asks about your whereabouts. I didn't know that he's away placed you here before. Where, I can't tell you every time, your grandma is extremely disappointed every time. I really hope you can stand in front of her. She always hopes that you put down your prejudices and hatred and live your own life." Gu Xiao's fingers moved again. Wen Xiao also saw it and knew that saying this would help strengthen his will to survive. He continued, "Your brother has never blamed you. He knows that everything you did was caused by your mother. You grew up in such an environment. It's not your fault that you have such an extreme and sick mother, and it's your mother's fault that you develop such a character." Gu Xiao's eyelids trembled. Susie put his hand on Wen Xiao's shoulder. "Continue." Wen Xiao knew that in this situation, Gu Xiao might be about to wake up, so he continued, "If you are willing to wake up, Fu Nanli will treat you as a younger brother." Susie said solemnly, "That's enough." Gu Xiao was very emotional now, and he had to inject him with a dose of tranquilizer, otherwise it would be detrimental to his health. Susie took a slender needle and inserted an injection of water into him. Then he stared at the various instruments aside, paying attention to the changes in the curves and numbers on them anytime and anywhere. Within 10 minutes, his mood gradually became stable and all indicators became calm. Susie said calmly, "No accident, I can wake up at night." Wen Xiao, Really? Well, I'll keep watch. You can go to bed. I'll guard it with you. Susie expected to wake up at 12 o'clock at night, but at that point, he still didn't wake up. Wen Qiao's cell phone was left in the room. Fu Nanli called her several times, but she didn't receive it. It wasn't until 2 o'clock in the morning that Wen Qiao, who was leaning against the wall, suddenly heard a voice, "Wake up." She suddenly opened her eyes and saw several doctors standing around Gu Xiao's bed, and Gu Xiao had already opened his eyes. The anxiety of the past few days finally came to a happy ending. Gu Xiao looked over at her, and Wen Qiao didn't know what kind of expression to make for a moment. She thought that her expression at this time should be quite silly. She waved to Gu Xiao, her expression a little stiff. I don't know if it was because she was a little confused in her sleep or for some reason, but I always felt that Gu Xiao, who was lying on the hospital bed not far away, had eyes that were a little bright, as if they were tears. She walked forward and comforted, "Just wake up. I will tell your brother. He has always thought about you. He will definitely feel at ease knowing that you wake up." Gu Xiao closed his eyes and seemed unable to speak for a while. Amnesiac Bigshot remembers only me, the boss lost his memory and only remembers me. Author, Ding Jiashu. Chapter 1020. Outside the ward, Susie looked at Hizawei. "He's awake. You can give me the information about the 7 people with the same blood type as Akiao. I already gave you 1. 6 more. Hizawei raised his eyebrows slightly. "I will give you 5 more, and I will keep the last one." Susie said solemnly, "Hizawei, you went back on your word." Hizawei's expression was cold and stern. "I'm just in case. This operation is completely controlled by you. If Gu Xiao suffers from any sequelae one day, at least I still have the chips in my hand to check you." Susie looked a little complicated. "Then give me the news about those 5 people. Finding these people one by one and getting them to donate blood willingly does not seem to be a matter of time. Even if Hizawei didn't tell them about the last person, they could check it out themselves. Hizawei can find out, and given time, they can also find out." Therefore, Hizawei did not go back on his promise and gave Susie clues about the 5 people. When he got the information, he frowned. Except for the first person in Hiken, the others were scattered everywhere, and there was even one person in a foreign country. It was indeed a huge project. But at least there was hope, and Wen Qiao felt much more at ease. As long as she doesn't take Fu Nanli's blood, no matter how difficult it is, she will definitely achieve it. Returning to the room, he habitually picked up the mobile phone on the bedside table. When he saw the missed call on the 5-way communication link, Wen Qiao felt a little bit in his heart and immediately called back. While listening to the other party's beeping sound, he checked his watch. In the early hours of the morning, 2:30. Logically speaking, Fu Nanli was asleep. Sure enough, after ringing for 30 seconds, no one answered the call. Wen Qiao thought for a moment and sent a message, "I'm late. I'll be back to Hiken tomorrow. I'll go directly to your place." Fu Nanli on the other end didn't sleep, and felt uneasy. He waited for her call until 2 in the morning, but she didn't even reply. Hearing her voice still made him feel unhappy. This girl was probably lying to him again. Joined forces with her brother-in-law to lie to him. When they meet tomorrow, he won't spare her. After observing for another half of the night, Gu Xiao recovered well, but Hizawei did not embarrass them and just let them go. Wen Qiao left the mansion and before getting in the car, he glanced at the building and saw Hizawei standing on the terrace on the 2nd floor, expressionless, looking at her with a heavy, uncomfortable gaze. She withdrew her gaze and got into the car. Naturally, her eyes were tied with black cloth. Some of the measures she took to prevent future troubles were of no use. Hizawei was still a little afraid and didn't do anything to them. After a winding journey, The car finally stopped at the entrance of Shuiying Road. The sycamore trees were in full bloom. She and her uncle got out of the car. "I want to go to Fu Nanli's place." "Uncle, please go home first." When she went to Fu Nanli's apartment, she pressed the password and the room was silent. It was midsummer, and it was already very hot in the morning. The cicadas were chirping outside, and the air conditioner in the room was turned on enough to create a feeling of ice and fire outside. Wen Qiao rubbed the goosebumps on his arms and didn't even have time to put on his slippers. "Go to the second floor with bare feet." "Are you sleeping in?" Fu Nanli is not someone who likes to sleep in. So, she went to the study room first. The study room was empty, except for the bright sunshine at 8 o'clock in the morning and the sound of cold air coming down from her head.